Okay, we're going to start on this first drawing exercise in Lesson 1. And as you look at Lesson 1, it'll be this exercise right here, where we're going to do this, a series of lines. What you see on this page in your book is that this dark line represents the edge of your paper. And of course, this really isn't to scale. But we're going to do 4 sets of lines, and what I'm going to do is explain each set of lines. Basically, you can follow right along right here in the instructions, and I'm just going to be actually drawing and talking about those instructions. So let me get this out of the way here. Okay. The idea in this exercise, this is a little ruler here, is to learn how to approximate measurements without using a ruler. In the classroom, you should have a ruler and it'd be passed around to you. This exercise, I want you to understand how to use and know what a 1/2 inch measurement is, a 1 inch measurement, and a 2 inch measurement. Now you can see the ruler here. This has centimeters on the bottom and the king's measurement on the top, which is pretty much all the United States uses, and we're about the only ones who still use this. 1 inch is about from this edge here to the 1. And I'm just marking them on the paper there to show you that distance. A 1/2 inch, which would be half that, is this longest mark in between the beginning of the ruler and the 1. You have to watch some rulers because they don't start at the edge of the ruler. Some rulers will leave a little space here, and you have to watch that sometimes when you're using a ruler to measure with. And so then the 2 inch measurement is here. Now the right here. So the longest line is where the number is. The second longest line is a 1/2. The next longest line on the ruler is a 1/4, and the next longest line is an 1/8. After that, it goes down to a 1/16 of an inch, and then a 32nd of an inch. So centimeters is infinitely more simpler. It's based on the tenths principle. So everything's divided into tens. So it doesn't really always even up the way that we do it here. A 1 is about 2.5 centimeters. 1/2 inch is about 1.5 centimeters, approximately. So when you see what that is, you know, there's as an artist, you might want to use something that's maybe called a rule of thumb. We'll use my finger, but you know, taking the digit or this metacarpal here, and you see this flex where it flexes right here. Mine's a little longer than 2 inches from this first knuckle here down to here. That's a little more than 2. Yours might just be 2, or yours might be a little longer. But it gives you a guesstimate of what might be 2 inches. Now, if I just go from the last metacarpal right there, this digit, that is about an inch. So you can take that and give yourself something that they call that a rule of thumb in a way. So the first thing we're going to do on this page, and we'll just disregard these little marks here, and I'll just use the same piece of paper. Now, of course, this paper is smaller than yours, and I'm just illustrating kind of a close-up of the corner, because everyone starts in the left-hand corner. So if you were to say that this edge of the paper on this pad is the same as your edge of your paper, and that the first directions are to begin a 1/2 inch away from the border. I'm kind of actually trying to read this as I'm talking to you to make sure I don't get it wrong here. So about a 1/2 inch away from the border, and you say, well, what's the border? Well, everybody, usually almost everything you do in this class will have a border on it. Now, when I look at this, if you go back to this here that I'm putting in the frame, this is basically the border and not the edge of the paper. The actual edge of the paper will be farther out. somewhere out here. So if I'm going to say this is the paper, and then I want to draw a border on the paper, it's approximately 1-inch border that you're going to draw on the paper. So we're looking at the upper left hand of your drawing paper right now. And so now you drew this border, and it's better if you draw it without a ruler to learn how to draw a straight line. Now, one thing you can do when you're drawing a line like this is, you see, if you hold your pencil like this and you don't have anything to steady your hand, it can get somewhat wiggly, you know. You can use your fingers to actually steady your hand, or steady it along the edge of the paper like this, and then when you draw it, it actually can make a straighter line. And you can just go all the way around like that. Painters use what's called a painter's awl, which actually is something they rest their hands on. It's not really the same principle, but what you're trying to do is steady your hand, because there's no way you can hold your arm and hold a pencil edge like that and keep it straight at the same time. So you have to rest your hand on the paper somehow, and it's better to rest it on the edge of the paper as you're drawing to get a border. You can use any finger you want, but it's hard to do if you just hold your pencil like this. You have to really try and hold it in a little different way. A painter holds a brush like this. You can hold your pencil like that. There's a couple different ways. You may have already heard about, you know, holding a pencil funny like this, and that's how you draw. Well, that's sometimes you draw like that, sometimes you hold it the way you sign your name. It just depends on what you're doing at the time. So back to this project, the first idea was to draw a border that's around 1-inch border. Now the first set of lines, as in everything you draw, depends on the first line you draw. This has to be a 2-inch high line, a 1/2 inch away from the side border and a 1/2 inch away from the top. So that's going to start somewhere around there, and about 2 inches long. Now there's my guess, 2 inches. I hope it's 2 inches. Darn close. So you can do that with practice. Is it a 1/2 inch away? Looks a little wider than a 1/2. It is a little wider. It averages just about a 1/16 wider than a 1/2 inch. That is a 1/2 inch, exactly. So, but what you're really trying to do is just to learn how to, first of all, judge distances, and then judge distances visually without a known quantity. In other words, this was known. This was a 1/2 inch, and 2 inches. Now the next one, is the same known quantity, has to be a 1/2 inch away, a 1/2 inch from here, and it has to be the same length. But I drew that line looking at this line. I no longer drew it by looking at a space of what I thought 2 inches was. Now once I've got 1 and I've got 2, all of them have to look the same. It's not as easy as it looks, because each one, you will generally find it easier to draw the next one based on the one before it. So if you notice, if I keep going along here and I don't pay much attention to what I'm doing, I could very easily make them start to go on an angle, or maybe go too high. So you notice, and that what I mean by that is, if you watch what I do, I'm going to just connect the lines with my pencil, and you see how these are kind of straight. This one goes downhill, and then they start to go uphill. These go kind of straight, and then they start going down this way. So all I'm doing is following the edge of the line with my pencil to show you what you're trying to do is to get them perfectly straight and perfectly even all the way across the page. And you're not drawing guidelines, you aren't drawing them with a ruler. The idea is to practice learning how to judge space and distance. So this is a 2-inch line, a 1/2 inch apart, all the way across the paper until you get to the other side. Should come out even, simply because these are 1/2 inch measurements. and the paper is 18 inches wide. And you had approximately a 1-inch border here and one on the other side. So you're working with an area that is 18 minus 2 inches, which is 16 inches. That's what you're working with in this space inside your border. And that's evenly divisible by a 1/2 inch. So once you get this line done, your next line, and again, we only have 3 measurements: 1/2 inch, 1 inch, and 2 inch. The next one is a 1-inch spacing with a 2-inch line. So that means it's 1 inch, it starts from here, and 1 inch from the edge, so it's got to be over here. But it's a 2-inch line. So now you go, well, that line looks longer than that one. One trick is, I could have measured this one since I know this one was pretty close, and use this, see, and use this one as my initial measurement for a 2-inch line, so it would be the same as this one. Now, if these are fairly accurate, then this, being 1 inch apart, is only going to be every other line. So now you can kind of just gauge and come down from every other line and draw your next one. So this whole line here becomes easier to do the spacing, only because you have to measure. You can measure from your one above, but the one above, if it's not very accurate, this one will be more difficult to do correctly, because the wider apart the lines are, the harder it is for you to compare the two. As in all drawing, you're always looking at the thing next to it to compare the two things. Overall, as you get later on in the semester, you'll be looking at things that are at the opposite end of the page. But in order to complete and construct a drawing, you need to look at what's right next to it. And if the thing next to it gets more than a certain distance away where your eye can't accurately measure it, then it becomes more difficult. And that's what this exercise is about. So this is the 2-inch line 1 inch apart with a 1-inch space in here. And then you'll start with the third set. And the third set is now 2 inches apart. So now you got to start down here. And that one is 2 inches apart. So now you're doing lines that are, you'll do one line here that's 2 inches long, and then you'll do another one way over here, which is 2 inches apart. These get even more difficult because they're farther away from this set, twice as far, and then they're twice as far apart. The fourth line is a combination of all 3. They're 2-inch lines, but the spacing varies from 1/2 inch to 1 inch to 2 inch into the middle of the papers. You look at this one over here, and then it goes back from 2 inch to 1 inch to 1/2 inch spacing. So that is a little more difficult because what you're trying to do is to space your selection of when you space the lines so that they gradually get wider and then gradually get closer together. What I did in this small exercise here is a lot easier because the space is so small. But you're going to be going in a space that's about 16 inches wide, so it becomes a little more difficult to concentrate to keep things even, because you're also trying to keep the lines perfectly horizontal. And that's this project.